for coming tonight. My name is Brigitte Dupas, and I'm the Get Out the Youth Vote campaigner with the Council of Canadians. There's a lot at stake in the upcoming election, for our communities and for our collective future. And we're here tonight to talk about what we can all do about it. First, we want to recognize that we are organizing on Indigenous lands, the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Attawadder, and Neutral. Please welcome Le Tunt, who will welcome us to these territories.
Loden Huniest is a language teacher of the Oneida language at the Oneida School on the Oneida Settlement. There are only about 70 people on Oneida that speak their language. One of the only settlements in North America that is not a reservation. He is actively involved in Idle No More and other groups that fight for the rights of our Aboriginal peoples, the land, water, and air. Loden.
In our teachings, some of the things that the older people talk about is they talk about the importance of the connection that we have to the land. And so the very first thing that we do whenever we get together as Haudenosaunee people is we give thanks. And they tell us that in the creation story, this is the first thing that we were taught. Because we understand in our creation story that human beings were the last thing that was created. The Creator, He went around and He created everything else before. Because He always had it in His mind that one day that He would create people, that He would create human beings. And so He wanted it to be, He intended it that everything would be here for us, that we would ever need, that we would ever want. Every medicine plant that's out there that we would need to cure any disease is out there. You know, all of the animals, you know, the plants, you know, that we need for our food sustenance, the waters to quench our thirst, it's all there. We would never be in want or need of anything. And so that is what is told to our people in our culture. That is the most important thing for us to do every day. And so that's what we were taught. The first thing that we do when we wake up in the morning and we open our eyes and we take that breath of life is we give thanks to see another day. And we give thanks and we acknowledge all of those things that continue to take care of us. And maybe right now our earth, it isn't in the best shape, but we acknowledge it, we greet it every day, and we continue to acknowledge those things that continue to take care of us, those life givers, those life supporters. And then the next thing that we talk about is we talk about those beings that were appointed in the sky. The sun, the grandmother moon, the stars, the four beings who watch over us and take care of our luck. And lastly, to the Creator for everything that He prepared for us. And in our creation story, a lot of times, you know, we hear things like that. Some of my language teachers, you know, they kind of question about whether or not the Creator is a man or a woman and all that kind of stuff. And in our creation story, it's very clear about who the one is that finished our bodies, that created us. But it's also very clear in the creation story that the first two people that came here to this land, to this world, were women. There's Sky Woman who fell from the sky world, and she gave birth to a daughter, and she gave birth to two twin boys. And those twin boys are the ones that went around and they created all of the elements that we see out there. So those two first life forces that were here on Earth were women. And we just talked about that you know, whatever, you know, kind of, you know, system that's out there, women have to be actively involved with it. They have to be that guiding hand. Because we were just talking about the Iroquois and the Algonquins and you know, some of the wars that took place between our people back in the 1600s and 1500s and things like that. And that's what happens when men have sole control over governments. is that's the first thing that they look to, you know, in terms of solving problems. And when the peacemaker came to us, that's what he done, is he established the clan mothers. The clan mothers would be the ones that would pick the leadership. And the chiefs, all they do is they speak to the issues. And so we gather here today and we have a common issue. We have common concerns. And so those are the things that unite us. Those are the things that bind us, is our love of the environment, our love of our Mother Earth. And that's what we're all compassionate about. So at this time, I'm going to say a few words in my language to give thanks and to give that honor and respect to our Mother Earth and all the things that were created in the beginning that continue to take care of us and support us in this life. Devi Vaikan and what's to Hadi, Chini Govanoda, then an Ongo net. They are going to go in a way Ladun. They keep not the Sangwawi, there's some way at Dizon. They get big Vaikan and Judilanto, then the Waivani Sade, eat a noon and a Bogaliwa and Dapon, then in the Bogaliwa and Dapon, then only one Podungon and a hundred Nagaliwa deck. Negative Gaikan, and then in Skyly, Gaikan, and one is Lade, and the Agaquadin, and the Oscar Hedun, and the Wadigon. Negative Queen and a Tonal Violet, Oscan Wakway, and the Wadigon, Yade Chinawila, and the Kanjo, Chisegune, and Wadun, Escan, and Yunatinu Hage, Dane Tonota Hage, and Wadigon. Dane Queen, they are not in the Wagovani Zade, they Chiduna Timasita Lakwa, they Chinokan and a Hunja. Negative Queen and Lavadon and Halfway on and what Kangade. Never halfway on and a Luxon, Netchuli was it, then they are going in and a boy again Pasla, never wait in a Hunjak and then I don't go to Bali. Negative Queen, I can't have Nessa go to Chigachi, and then I put at the Hatches, then it doesn't put us in a David, I can't and they are going in and then what's to Hadi. They are going in and you see at the Gempa. They can wait up some, they chew Punjade, and then you go to Bali. Negative big I can't enter the Lanto, then a wipe over the Zade, they open a guns, they watch each of Navilot, then it's got Niguanas and you lay a ganipa. They only then it's Kylie, there's to go to Chiguchi, then you got Katahadi, there's to go to Chiguchi, then they go to Chitahadi. Down negative big I can't and Oyan and then wipe over the Zade, and then it's Chubakaki Poke, they enter the Lanto, then wipe over the Zade, and then a Wakit, they got New Hundes. Negative big I can't toy and Munta, Nechi Punjade, Negani Manane Yotalihan, and the Scovella body. Negative bean and then Skyline, Oyan and Wakovani Sade, Nechi Nafton and Tulat Kandade, then Puyum Wam, Neyaga waiting and then what we got yet, and then Kayun Squago, Neyaga waiting and what Yapis, Negai again Hasla, then Oliver Wave and the Loyan down as to Guayakizon. Negative Queen and then Skyline, I can't go to Chigachi, and so not live up to Chitahadi. Darning big I can't and the Oyan and then the Wakovani Zade, and then June Head. Hasanatikonda Dundele, and then to Guana, and then Kutikuana, they are waiting and then what's the honey, and then what an arts, and then I'm Guadons. Darning Queen, Neoyan and then the Wakovani Zade, Nechi Nafte, then the Sungwawi, and Sungwayakizon. They I can't and then you couldn't put talk. They are waiting and then Wahaway home and then you can't again, and then what a bunch of it, and then it's going to walk down, and then it's Kalibani Hunt. Dane Queen, Oyan and then the Wakovani Zade, and then a Godilio Soha. They I can't and a Ganicalio Gas, and then Chito Lane and a Godilio Tomanas, and you lay a Ganica. They only then and the Wakovani Zade, and then a Ganun and then Tani Nugget, and then Galpak. They I can't and a Galunde Soha. David I can't and Wastan and Nicolando, and then Pulawan. David I can't and then Wakovani Zade, and then a Canicalunda, they Chito Lane and a Calutuanas, and you lay a Ganica. Negative I can't and the Oyan and then the Wakovani Zade, they Uchita Hatso. They watch up then in the Hadia Rodas, they watch up then in the Havis, and then in the Vaso Coda. They only then and the Wakovani Zade, they have to go to Lanage. They got you on and then Patunde, and they are waiting, and the halfway go next can on into Nakuni. Negative and then Skyline, let's go to Chiguchi, then I got Katahadi. They cheat not, and then halfway go in the down and then Punjab. Negative mean and Tonnet Violet, what's gone what way you need, you got the one, Yade Chinaway, Chinya Hovita, Chiu Punjade, and 18 Ohan and Angahak, Dane Toyota Hake, and you got the one. Dane Viga, Dane and Honan and the Holy Wakatsi, Aine Hovita, the Sukoli Mondorio, 18 foot. Negative mean at Gelato, and then the Waikovanese are, and then 18 foot, and then the Sakayon days, and they are the Santos, Naguana, Tadion Duck. Negative week I can't let you know next time. Hazen and Sunyat and you Punjade, they only then and then Skyvi. They say that you wait up, so then I what comedy, then we will wait and they can't you and on and is what then I say T1 okay, then they'll be one of the jets. Negative week I can't and Honan and then away over these are they take me to what need a luck. They want his law Denny, they was Sunda Denny, then you get a destiny. Negative week I can't enter Gelato, then the way over these are they what you galapa, then was going to get take on and then what they get what need of it. Negative week I can't and then they was what then they are going in and they have to leave and then you put a body and then you Punjab. Negative week I can't and then the way over these are they week I can't and then the Diogala, then you keep foot and then what's they get what need of it. They only then they you kill a hadi, then they only go on us, they cheat nothing and they continue on up. They get weak like Gane or Yan and then wipe over these are then they do the Diogala, then they cheat along your daddy, they put you stop wild, and then put you stop what so. They get weak like Gane or Yan and then wipe over these are then they guy any hadi, and then they guy any one way again, they let you get low. They only then tickle you in the wag, and then head to a guana, and it's going to leave. They cheat nothing and starts in Valley Wayantos, and then I come up with a dumsla, they cheat in Valley Folder. They get big I got and then Tonnet Violet, Muscan, what way you need, you want the Gola, Yade Chinaway Ladun, they big I got and again in the Hovita, the Sukoli Mondorio, 18 foot, Dane Toyota Hagen and Swati Gom. Dane get big I got and then Honan and then Tulun the user away. They cheat to La Plan and to the Punjab and Square Dison. They cheat nothing and have way on the line and down. They get green and then Tonnet Violet, Muscan walkway to need a Wadi Gola, Yade Chinaway Ladun, they come Yage Town, Nest and Where Dison, Dane Toyota Hagen, name Wadi Gom. Dane get big I got, they 20 late, then the Gully was waiting, and she knocked it and the Bugally went dog, where Nick I got and then the one he's locked. Dane get big I got and then the snell ticket, then 20 late and then the Gully was waiting, and she knocked it and the Bugally went dog, where Nick I got, they are waiting and Ugly one put one and then 100 Gully was there. Dane get big I got it at South Noon and then Diadoctus, and then it was Gun Hazen and then it's Wadi Gola. They only then an Alpua and then Alkian de Hadi. Then Aga waiting and Aga don't talk again and G to an old and an on over there. Dane couldn't target and Swati Gom. So with that, that is a brief, short, condensed version of our Thanksgiving address. And I tried to trim it down as much as I could. For inviting me to come out here tonight and to share a few words with your crew here tonight. Yaupo.
Thank you so much to Latun for sharing your wisdom and words with us.
Finally, after 9 years, it took me to go for the paddle. And this is a paddle we made for you, a cherry wood paddle we're done. And you've been such a good friend over these years. And on behalf of the Council of Canadians. And we actually took this down our trip. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So you got your paddle, brother.
Thank you as well to the Council of Canadians chapter and to Roberta Corey. Tonight is part of a series of town halls on democracy and the next election that is taking place in at least 10 communities from coast to coast. We see how people are coming together to organize to see a much-needed change after 9 years. Tonight, we will hear from inspiring speakers, we will discuss what is at stake, and together we will decide how to take action to make that change happen. We would like to thank the organizations partnering to make this tour happen: the Council of Canadians, Unifor, PSAC, QP, and the Directors Guild of Canada. Without them, this would not be possible. Woo! And a huge thank you to our fantastic London chapter who has made this event happen tonight. And now, we will hear from our speakers on what's at stake in this election and what we can do about it, followed by a question and answer period and discussion. Our first speaker is Maud Barlow. Maud Barlow is the National Chairperson of the Council of Canadians and author of a new report called Broken Covenant: How Stephen Harper Set Out to Silence Dissent and Curtail Democratic Participation in Canada. Welcome, Maud.
Thank you very, very much for this shift, and thank you to all who put this on. Thank you to the beautiful words and the beautiful prayer that preceded this. Very, very important that we come together as a community, as a people across the country, and assert the values that we know are true to the vast majority of Canadians. And so this tour is about, and probably going to extend into the fall, we're thinking, is about really urging Canadians to understand that they're not powerless. We're not powerless. And after 9 years of Stephen Harper telling us we don't matter, that the only people that matter are the 30% of his hardcore supporters and none of the rest of us matter, many people are feeling disenfranchised and disempowered. And it's our job, I think, collectively to say, then they win if this happens. So I'm just going to share really quickly, because each of us is only speaking for a short time, 5 things that I'm most concerned about and 5 things I'm excited and happy about. Concern number 1 is this assault on civil society. I wrote the report that Bridget talked about, and it's an extraordinarily disturbing story that Stephen Harper and the Conservatives set out to break the ties that have existed between all governments, all federal governments, and all political parties since after the Second World War, to build up a coalition or a partnership between civil society and the Canadian government, successive Canadian governments, on justice, on environment, on culture, and a whole range of areas. Often funding the very organizations that turned around and gave them great grief, but this was believed by all political parties to be a core part of our society and how you build democracy. And this government has systematically set out to what I call clear-cut the civil society movement. They have defunded hundreds of organizations. They're going after the charitable status of 60 organizations they don't like. But most importantly, what I found in the research is that they've cut government agencies and services to a vast array of grassroots organizations working on everything from literacy to homelessness to working with people with disabilities, new Canadians, refugees, people who've been victims of torture, First Nations. They've just clear-cut programs across the board. And it's basically the Harper government saying, we don't want to be involved in any of this, we don't want you empowered, we want to bring the federal government down to its smallest possible size and just look after things like military buildup and their version of security. That's the first. The second thing I'm really worried about is the gutting of our environmental laws, particularly the laws protecting water. We don't take very good care of our water in this country. We have what I call the myth of abundance, but at least we had the laws here if we were in the mind to enforce them, but they have devastated the Fisheries Act, the Navigable Waters Protection Act, and the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, so that 99% of all of our lakes and rivers in Canada are now totally unprotected at the federal level from any pipeline or any extractive industry carrying any kind of poison extreme energy. There is no protection left. The third thing on top of mind I'm really concerned about is their so-called Fair Elections Act. You'll remember that the Council of Canadians, with applicants from a number of ridings across the country, went to court against the Conservative Party of Canada in the last election, and a federal court said yes, voter fraud took place. It was widespread, and the likely cause was at the foot of the Conservative Party of Canada. They threw a 750-page affidavit at us. You just wouldn't have believed it. They called me a wanton and officious intermeddler. I haven't won that case in an extraordinary judgment against the government of the day. And so what did they do? They brought in, to deal with this, the so-called Fair Elections Act, which disenfranchises millions of, hundreds of thousands of Canadians. 400,000 Canadians just used their voter information card in the 2011 election. They've disallowed this, and they basically said, young people, First Nations, older people, people who have to travel with their work, you don't matter to us. In fact, the Minister, Pierre Poilievre, said basically that it's just 400,000 votes. And when you stop and think that in only 11 ridings last time, if just 6,000 and a bit more of us had voted for the party, a different party than the Conservatives, they would not have had their majority. And I guess the last thing in my unhappy list, I mean, I have many things, but of the top 5 that come to mind is the assault on health care. They have brought in a funding formula so that starting in 2016, they'll be taking massive amounts of money out of the federal portion of funding of health care. And the clear intent, don't forget, Stephen Harper worked for the National Citizens Coalition, which was founded to prevent public health care in the first place. Is very clearly has stated in the past he doesn't believe in the 5 conditions and principles of the Canada Health Act. This is a perfect way to do away with them, because once the federal government's no longer funding health care in this country, we break up into the privatized system we all can see coming. So those are my 5 unhappy things. My 5 happy things, and they are very happy, the first of them is Alberta. I was in Red Deer, and I can tell you the air feels different. There's a feeling in the air. And it isn't just New Democrats who feel excited. It's just that the place is on fire. Everybody feels like the dragon has been slain, that they lived under this regime for so long, nobody could imagine that there was another one, and they understand that this is a new day. And we're going to do that on October 19th. We're going to do that. Challenging the so-called Fair Elections Act. On July 2nd and 3rd, the Council of Canadians and the Canadian Federation of Students are going to court to try to get an injunction here in Ontario, in Toronto. Anyone who wants to come and be part of it would be exciting, because we believe this to be a profoundly undemocratic process that the government has initiated. And we're fighting back. We're going to continue to fight back, because it's even up to the day of the election, we're not going to allow him, Stephen Harper, to continue to take away our democratic rights. My third happy thing is the incredible leadership of First Nations across this country, and the incredible mobilization of youth. I mean, Bridget and others have been going across the country working with young people, getting people to pledge to vote. It's a very exciting movement that we're building here. But I want to say a special shout out to First Nations leadership, because as you look at the gutting of those water laws, in many ways, it's only First Nations treaties and agreements and rights that stand between us, not just First Nations, but all of us. and a devastated environment. And the relationship between First Nations and settlers, non-First Nations, is in all my years of working, I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen a trust that's been built up. Maybe we do owe some gratitude to Stephen Harper for this, but it is a really exciting moment, and I want to acknowledge that here. My fourth thing that I'm excited about is the fight back against fast track in the United States and the fight back against both CETA, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, and TTIP, the US trade agreement. And that is an incredibly exciting fight back. We need to launch that kind of fight back here in Canada. I'm not going to slip into negative, but I do want to say that they are having a real battle in Europe around the investor-state provision of these agreements, which not only allow corporations, as they do in NAFTA, to bypass their own governments and directly sue the governments of another country, so they have the status of governments, for any law that they bring in, improving health, safety, environmental records, and so on, but they actually build into these agreements what they call regulatory convergence, and that is that you have to set up a process that's outside of the legislatures to bring convergence to things like food safety and animal health and labor laws and environment. And so a company like Monsanto could just, day one of the agreement being signed, just walk in and say we want to have same similar regulations and standards on both sides of the ocean, and you know that they don't want higher standards. This is a move by the corporations of both countries to downgrade environmental standards everywhere. So we need to join with that movement. It was my great honor to have a moment to debate Chancellor Merkel, and I basically challenged her that everything that you're supposed to be talking about at the G7, or all that you're doing at the UN on the development goals, on empowerment of women and dealing with climate and so on, means nothing as long as you are continuing with these macroeconomic policies, deregulation of trade, deregulation of the environment, deregulation of financial institutions. And these are this is the heart of economic globalization that we've been living under for 35 years. And you have to say to these people, how's it going for you? The UN just put out a report 2 weeks ago. They came up with a new word, the precariat. Now, 3/4 of the world's people seeking work cannot find decent work, cannot find substantive work, are precarious workers, don't have pensions, don't have security. 3/4 of the world. Was that the intent? I actually believe it was, but certainly they need to answer for it. It's not working. That system is not working. And I wished I'd had an hour in quiet with none of the media there to talk to Angela Merkel, because I think inside there is a good person I could have gone to. I just know it. My last happy thing, and then I'm going to get off the stage because you've got a wonderful lineup here, and that is the wonderful new group of leaders that are leading the labor movement in this country. Just absolutely fabulous. To Paul Moyes, to Deb Devio, to Robin Benson, to a whole host of leaders across this country. Again, as I would say with First Nations, I have never seen the strength and the muscle and the belief that we need to work together, and it is incredibly important. Hassan has been a breath of fresh air. The Canadian Labour Congress is going out saying we need to work with civil society. We cannot do it alone. I read a terrible article about the devastation of the union movement, the trade union movement in the United States, and how people didn't fight back. We have to fight back with labor on behalf of working people. We have to stand together, because this assault is deadly, and they, mark my words, they want to destroy collective bargaining in this country, and they cannot be allowed to do it. I'm just going to end by giving you a promise, and that promise is that after October 19th, Stephen Harper is not going to be our Prime Minister.
All right.
Tell them this, that he is not going to take our Medicare, our institutions, our movement, our values, our dreams, and our hearts with him. Those belong to us.
Yeah.
Our next speaker is Hassan Youssef. Hassan is the president of the Canadian Labour Congress. He was elected in May 2014 as the first person of color to lead the country's labour movement, winning a mandate for change to increase activism in response to the challenges facing unions. Hassan was elected president of the Trade Union Confederation of the Americas in 2012 for a 4-year term, heading an international labor group representing more than 50 million workers in 29 countries. His prior international experience includes being an observer for the historic first democratic South African elections in 1994 that elected Nelson Mandela as president. Welcome, Hassan.
Thanks very much, Bridget. First, let me say thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. When I came in, I saw the weather. I was contemplating I go to the bar or come in here. Glad I came in here. So thank you for taking the time. Let me thank the council and, of course, its chapters across the country for the incredible work they do on a day-to-day basis across this country to keep democracy alive, and more importantly, to give hope to working people. I'm in your city, so I might insult some of you. I hope I'm not. But I think this terrible strike that's happening with my colleagues in the QP is absolutely unacceptable. The city council and the mayor should know better, because they got the support of our members and our labor council, and we have no intention of allowing these workers to lose this strike. No, never. Brothers and friends, it's good to be here tonight. Of course, I can't tell you, of course, Maud eloquently described what's at stake in our country in a small way, and I hope to do the same here tonight. Like Maud and the council and our friends collectively, I've been traveling the country since last May. I think I've seen more of this country than most Canadians will ever see in their entire lifetime. But I have to tell you, the energy that's in this room is equally every place I go across this country. Canadians from coast to coast are engaged, are involved, and more importantly, I think they're determined to fight, because what's at stake is the future of this country. It's about our kids, it's about our movement, and more importantly, for what kind of Canada we want to grow up in, what kind of Canada we want to live in. I can tell you what this Prime Minister has done in the last 9 days need to be reversed. The only way we can reverse it, he can kick his rotten ass out of office. We have to work together, because no one of us can do this alone. We have to put aside whatever difference we may have and recognize what's at stake, and more importantly, the incredible strength we bring together. We can mobilize and engage, of course, our families, our friends, our neighbors, our colleagues, whoever they might be, and start those conversations, because despite how well the polls may be showing right now, we still have a lot of work to do, I think, right across this country. And October 19th may be just around the corner, but I do believe if we allow the summer to go by and not keep that work going, we will, of course, allow this Prime Minister to get another mandate. Sisters and brothers, of course, coming from our movement, it's critical for me to say that since this government got a majority in 2011, they did not even waste a single moment to attack the labor movement and continue, of course, that attack on our movement. The first group of workers, of course, to fall victim to their attack was our friends in the CUPW in Canada, Post workers who were locked out by the government, to be legislated by the government back to work, and more importantly, to impose a settlement that was not even called for by the employer in terms of wages. More importantly, they imposed the most draconian settlement in terms of arbitration, final offer selection. As a matter of fact, Canada Post finally decided, rather than negotiate and go through this process, decided to go back to the bargaining table and negotiate with the workers to finally reach an agreement. Of course, they have not stopped there. Your Canada workers have taken over a decade of concessions with their company, sacrificed to keep that company. Again, this government intervened almost 5 times against Air Canada workers, legislating back to work. In public sector unions, they've seen a devastation we've never seen in the public sector in our country. these workers who go in day out and continue to provide a public service, despite the many challenges that they face, this government continue, of course, to attack those workers. By the time, of course, their mandate ends, of course, here in October, almost 48,000 workers, including the 6,000 Canada Post workers, will likely lose their jobs as a result of this government. This government attacks the most basic and the most fundamental protection we have in terms of health and safety, the right to refuse unsafe work in the federal jurisdiction, without a single debate in Parliament as to why they were changing the provision. As I speak to you tonight, of course, the Senate is still dealing with Bill C-377, as they call it, Financial Transparency Act. This has nothing to do with financial transparency in the labour movement. As a matter of fact, if these idiots were to dare to show up at one of our union meetings, they will find out what transparency looks like.
Yeah.
It's really about attacking the most fundamental thing we do to defend our members. Is that we don't negotiate collective agreements on behalf of our members, we defend them in the public arena. And we will never give up our right to defend our members in the public arena in this country, ever, regardless of whether 377 should become law in this country. This is the same government, by the way, for a provision we've had in the Canada Labour Code for over 60 years, Bill C-525 ended, of course, automatic certification for unions in the federal jurisdiction. All because they can through a private member's bill. Without much debate, despite all the criticism they face, including from the employers in the federal jurisdiction, they passed the bill nevertheless.
Shame.
6-year, of course, we don't know why the government is doing this. We have a very balanced system as it is right now. But you have to intervene to do that. Of course, and only a coward Prime Minister would dare, of course, pass with his new provisions in C-51 to tell us when 2 of our servicemen died in this country, of course, we need to, of course, recognize the harm that came to their families. Pass the most draconian measure we've ever seen. That will take away our basic civil rights in our country that's protected by our charter. And rather than simply say this is fundamentally wrong, I think sometime in the near future the Supreme Court would rule. But it's critical, I think, in that piece of legislation for us to understand this government, of course, using every means to divide Canadian society. What was this about? It's to somehow tell us that our Canadians and Muslim Canadians can't be trusted in our country. We should never accept a government to use such a draconian measure to create division in our country. It is harmful to the basic took away the most basic thing in our country, health care for refugees. Those who flee countries seeking, of course, sanction in our countries, of course, and sanctuary in our country, they introduce provisions so we can save a few bucks. Maybe if you stop running one of their phony ads, we can give refugees the health care they deserve. I'm here tonight to simply say we need to put our hands together, put our shoulders together. What's at stake is simply about the democracy of this country. There are many in this audience much older than me that know fundamentally the struggles from the past to create and build this country. And all that we've built are about to be lost if we don't get rid of this rotten government on October the 19th. I think we can only do this from learning from what we've done in the past. We must come together to figure out a way how we're going to mobilize, how we're going to be engaged, and how we're going to work like we've never worked before. I can tell you without any hesitation, I'm going to finish, I think, tomorrow night in Toronto, a 23C tour that we started, of course, back in March, and it'll finish tomorrow night, crisscrossing the country and community after community, mobilizing our members for what's at stake, and more importantly for them to take some responsibility for the work that we all have to do. It's critical, as Martha said earlier, for us to learn something. You know, a 45-year dynasty in Alberta came to a crashing halt because working people said, enough of this bullshit. How is it that working people should continue to make sacrifices such basic things as health care and education, and the rich and the powerful in that province wouldn't do their fair share? We got an NDP government that said, listen, we get elected, we'll increase corporate taxes, and they passed a law that says exactly that's what's going to happen. The problem is 4 years ago, Canadians didn't think that the NDP could win, of course, Quebec. Guess what? They won. 4 years ago, Canadians didn't think the NDP could win and become the opposition in the House of Commons. I think what we started as this great project to restore pride in our country must come to a logical end. On October the 19th, we need to do everything we can, sisters and brothers, to restore our democracy, to renew our country, and of course, put it back on the right path. Because working people like you need the things that we have built in the past, our healthcare system, our social programs, that ensure that working people, when they lose their job, can get decent benefits. Less than 35% of the unemployed today get benefits. 65% get nothing. $2 billion pulled from the unemployment fund in the recent budget so we can give income splitting to the rich in this country, who've had more than their fair share since the 9 years of Stephen Harper government. All I can say to you, sisters and brothers, I conclude, it's hard work ahead. It's a difficult challenge, but I think if we put our hands together and work as hard as we can, I know we'll have that victory we all deserve on October 19th. I'm going to join you to do everything I can and ensure we can win that victory. You join me, and of course, my colleagues here tonight, we will make history again. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Colonel Pat Stogren. He was Canada's first Veterans Ombudsman. In early 2010, Colonel Pat Stogren repeatedly criticized the federal government's treatment of veterans. He deplored the obstructive bureaucracy of the Department of Veterans Affairs and of key government agencies which had prevented him from serving the interests of former soldiers. In the summer of 2010, Stogren was informed that he would not be appointed for a second term. The Conservative government claimed that the replacement of Stogren by Guy Parent was not politically motivated. Welcome, Colonel Pat Stogren.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Thank you very much to the Council of Canadians for inviting me here, especially to Rod Morley. I gotta say, I don't really know where I am right now. I spent 30 years of my adult life in the military, and I gotta say that, as such, my politics are probably quite a bit right of Genghis Khan. But my experience as the Ombudsman was really an awakening for me. And I spent in my career almost 2 years in war zones, Bosnia and Afghanistan. And I'm here to say that nothing that I endured in a war zone was anywhere near as traumatic as the 3 years I spent as the Veterans Ombudsman. And, I find it interesting that I'm here now because what I'd like to say to you is, in all of the discussions about security and things like that, I've been radicalized. Now, if I say jihad here, I'll probably have CSIS. In fact, I bet CSIS is watching me already. But no, quite honestly, as a result of my experience as the Ombudsman, I really wondered what being Canadian was all about, because everything that I had stood for, everything that I fought for, everything that I told the young troops that were following me we were fighting for, turned out to be a lie. And whereas I might not agree with some of the politics that goes on, what I can say is that I believe in democracy, and God bless the differences between us. And God bless the fact that we have democracy where we're supposed to reconcile our differences and find a consensus to make our country stronger, to make the world a better place. What I found in government, and we're seeing it play itself out in the court right now with the whole Duffy affair, is that our government is a cesspool of malfeasance and malevolence. PTSD, but I was very messed up for 3 or 4 years after my time as Veterans Ombudsman. I wanted to go to war. And I'm going to war. The difference between me and any of the other wars that I've been to right now is that I'm Canadian, and I believe in fighting this war the Canadian way. I had visions of becoming, in my afterlife as a military officer, joining a multi-million-dollar security company or something like that and living the high life overseas. But I found I had to retrench and start to stand up for some of the things that I believe in here in Canada. And I believe that what I witnessed within Veteran Affairs Canada and the Veterans Review and Appeal Board is but the tip of the iceberg. Okay, I believe that the victimization of veterans is symbolic of the victimization of all Canadians who have ever needed help from the government. I'm absolutely convinced of it, folks. So I don't like to talk about Stephen Harper because you know what? We voted him in, and God bless democracy. As much as I hate it. I loathe the man. I loathe the politics. But I'll tell you, when I was the ombudsman, okay, I met with politicians from all parties. And I met with people from the Conservative Party, members of Parliament, who came to me and said, Pat, I wish we could do more. We just can't. We can't do it. Conversely, I met with other members of the government who you are probably much more comfortable in the company of. But at the risk of being vulgar, I would say that the people on the other side of the floor didn't know if they were punched, bored, or reamed. They really have no idea of what is happening. We live in a democracy that is winner take all. So let's be honest. After the election, let's get rid of the opposition and just wait for the next election, because it seems like that's what we do. Canadians, we live in a climate that's trying to kill us. And Canadians, as a result, are extremely communal, okay? Because if you don't help your neighbor dig out of the snow, they're going to freeze to death. And we're also very optimistic. Too optimistic. Like, because spring's here, we're never going to have to endure another winter like that. But I'm telling you, folks, unless we have a true Canadian spring, the way the Arab spring played out, we're, you know, as bad as this government is, I don't have to think too far back to a Chrétien government who did virtually the same kind of stuff, but not quite as extreme. But let's face it, life is all about becoming more extreme. What kids are doing with bikes today, I thought I was a daredevil as a young kid. What they're doing with bikes today sends shivers up my spine. Can you imagine where our democracy will be 10 years hence? And it's not just Stephen Harper, because Michael Ignatieff has gone around the world now preaching that democracy is dead. And he blames himself for having whipped the party and forced them to toe the party line. He blames himself for dismantling our democracy. And to me, folks, that is the biggest threat. So I left the office of the Veterans Ombudsman, and you know, I was a warfighter. I was a strategist. I love controversy, and I'm looking forward to the discussions we have here tonight very much. Only because debate's a great way to learn, and I'm learning. I've learned a lot just from our first two speakers, Maud and you, sir. Thank you very much for that. I've learned, but that's the nature of our democracy. What I've witnessed is that the senior bureaucrats in the public service are an oligarchy. And when I came out of the office of the Veterans Ombudsman, all punched, drunk, and messed up, the first thing that landed on our laps as Canadians was the residential schools. You know, the last residential school closed, I think, in 1996. So we can't blame previous generations about this. You know the new Veterans Charter that you've all heard about and how it's ripping off veterans? Now, there are a lot of good parts to this, and it was brought up as a good bill because the old pension was a bit dated. But it was created and carried by the bureaucracy. It was handed to Albina Valnieri, the Liberal government, and she virtually, when the law came down, she virtually apologized to veterans, knowing that they were taking away the pension and were going to stiff the young veterans of Afghanistan. She virtually apologized for it. So this was an agenda of the bureaucracy that we didn't know about. And I'll ask you something, okay? Residential schools is one thing. The new Veterans Charter is another. What else is happening behind the scenes? So what I am big on, and this is the first kind of group that I've spoken to many student groups, many veteran groups, people interested in veterans. This is the first kind of political activist group, you know. And to me, activism has become synonymous with leadership, and I applaud you all for the leadership that you're showing by coming to something like this and standing up for what's important in Canada. But first and most importantly in this country, so that our labor unions can fight the government on an equal footing, so that our First Nations community can fight the government on an equal footing, the bureaucracy has to be compelled by law to be transparent. Where if I didn't do what I was told, I was thrown in jail. And I believed in that because we are serving Canadians. And if we violate that trust, just if we prejudice that trust, then we've lost the confidence of our country. We can't function. And I'll tell you folks, I lost that with the federal government, with the bureaucracy. So I'll just close now, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion we're having here. But in my retirement as a crotchety old man, no, I'm not. I've had some very, very serendipitous moments in my career to have commanded the first troops in Afghanistan in 2002. And I'd also say it was very serendipitous for me to have become Canada's first Veterans Ombudsman, so I could expose to Canadians that kind of thing. And, you know, I didn't mention the Attawapaskat part of this because, to me, I've become as passionate about our First Nations people as I am about our young soldiers, sailors, and Air Force personnel. People are dying in the streets of Attawapaskat. And I heard Chuck Sproul on the radio on 9th of January 2011 saying, oh yeah, that was a slow-moving train wreck. We just didn't know when it was going to hit and what was going to happen. So he was more worried about the political fallout of this than he was about Canadians dying on the streets of this country of ours. So in my retirement as a crotchety old man, what I'm going around doing is I'm promoting a fight for independence. And that's not independence as in getting rid of the monarchy. That's independence in terms of independent members of Parliament. Yeah. And I look around here, and I bet there's all sorts of people that are card-carrying Liberals. There are all sorts of people that are card-carrying NDP, Green Party, of course. There's even somebody who used to be a progressive conservative but probably wouldn't admit it. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could find in this room right here a spokesperson who could go out and win the hearts and minds to reflect all of your views? And wouldn't it be great if we could get every community to send an independent politician to Ottawa, much like the Reform Party did way back when, before they got this glimmer of, they were a balanced party. But wouldn't it be great if every community sent somebody who's not going to represent Justin or Harper or Elizabeth, but going to represent you, and is going to take the consensus of your views and say, yes, you know what, I'll do whatever is best for our community. And ultimately, because Canada is about community, that would be for the best of Canada, I think, and it would break the stranglehold of these, really the three parties who have destroyed our democracy. I'm very sorry, yes, I need the podium. I straighten my skirt, I can go on like this for hours. I love the fight, but I also love Canada, and I love what you guys are doing. And I hope that we can come together to fix democracy, not just get rid of Harper, because somebody down the pipe is going to first. And there's strength in unity. So thank you very much. Hopefully